So far, we've spoken a lot about the challenges in the procurement process and the problems with the procurement process in the New Zealand construction industry. So, Marty, if there's something we could do differently, yeah, what do you reckon that would be? What does it look like?
Okay,
A
well,
better procurement model.
I think you know where I'm coming from previous discussions, but let's just throw out there PCSA and ECI. But before I sort of get into those, what I've heard today is we've all spoke independently about the wider issues in the industry, okay? And I think all those roads lead to one thing, and that is if we can get a common solution to all of those problems, all of a sudden, the amount of engineers that are not fit for purpose, the amount of misinformation that you have to, or lack of information, omissions, etc., that you have to somehow try and have contingency for in your pricing at tender level, they all go away, because the one common denominator is that as long as the information that we're all looking at is the same information, it's the same program, and it's 99% completed design, and a lot of these problems go away. So how do we get to that point in time where we have, a 99.9% design? I'm probably reaching quite high there, but and it's got to be through that one word that we all bring up a lot, but never seems to quite gain traction in the industry, and that's collaboration. So if we're all batting for the same side, in that at the front end of these projects, we decide all the risks together. We decide what the program looks like together based on working with the design together, by bringing in experts from every field to contribute their knowledge of how long it takes to sort of work out all the holes in your pipeline pricing. All of a sudden, the engineer of the contract hasn't got any problems to solve, because everyone is priced on the same page. Everyone's, the BIM model has captured all of those clashes, or at least, again, 99% of them. So that when we get to that real world, we've already built it once. We built it once in the virtual world, and we built it once commercially, correctly, well, at least as accurately as we can. At the moment, 60, 70, 80% at best will be our probably common level that we achieve. And that leads us into PCSAs. So, I've been fortunate enough to work on one particular PCSA that went really, really well during COVID. And the net outcome was a project that was on time and on budget during COVID.
Yeah.
So it can be done.
Yeah.
And it had all the usual players. It had, your significant PQSs out there, had a significant client, and it had significant consultants. Yes, there was some issues. Could we have done it better? Yeah. But this is one of the first steps, this particular PCSA. So, and that worked on about 12 months out from build. And it made brave decisions like, let's split the consent. Let's start the bits we can so that we're taking the pressure off the program. It brought in early contractors. We had to speak to some of the rebar specialists out there to get some idea of the foundation design, because that was one of our early consents.
So, James, you've worked in a lot of alliances that are set up for collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, the part...
Is there true collaboration?
I don't want to be the negative guy.
You don't need to be the negative.
You need a 10th man in every room.
Yeah, but part of the reason I'm just trying to think. I mean, when I look at some of the projects I've been on and why you might make a procurement decision for an alliance as your delivery model, is that idea of the fact that you don't have detail, and you're sort of trying to provide the environment in which to create that detail, I guess. And so the part that I was just confused about, and it's a clarity that might be worth it for everyone, is sort of saying, right, well, how we break up the project into its stages and what detail we expect to be created at each of those stages, so that we're building towards a point where we do have the definition that we require, having taken in all the inputs that we require. And so the question being, of course, at which point along that line do we contract? Do we start to say, right, well, now we've got a deal, or now we have a price, or whatever it is? Or is it actually more just about managing, as you say, the collaborative behaviours right through that process so that everyone is getting treated fairly?
I think I would answer that by analogy, a space analogy.
Go on.
Okay, like we live around the sun. Okay, around this sun there's a Goldilocks zone. Yeah, where all the correct ingredients for a successful life exist. The same could be said for that program of procurement, starting with the concept design right through to where you sign up, subcontractors. The Goldilocks zone, I feel, is somewhere around that end of preliminary design, start of developed design.
Mm.
That's the point where you've got the architects and the consultants had enough to collaboration, enough design to sort of put a really, really good idea on the table. But it's not fixed in terms of where the material comes from. It's not fixed in terms of when you go for consent. So if you pull get the right ingredients for the cake at that point, that Goldilocks zone, then all of a sudden things will start evolving. So it's timing.
It's interesting though. I mean, in the latest alliance I've worked in, they had a design team that were probably the most commercially savvy group I'd worked with. And I mean commercially savvy in the sense of being very committed to their cost and time outcomes. What that meant though, of course, is that they didn't want change. We can't handle change.
And that's one of the challenges.
Because this is what we've priced and this is what we're doing and we're on track to deliver it. And they wanted to make it very, very clear because when you get to that delivery phases, I think there's a very easy trap to fall into an alliance to blame the designers. Now, what that meant though, is that the true benefit you get from that alliance is the input of all those different contracting groups you can bring into the conversation. So what they were doing was creating a great outcome for the design team in terms of being able to say we did what we said we were going to do. But in terms of the project had compromised on outcome because it wasn't collecting the inputs that it needed to get the best possible solutions. And so there's an answer to that problem, isn't it? Which is to get those people in earlier, get them involved in the process earlier and be realistic of our expectation of how long it takes because design's tricky. Getting design definition, it's tough work. And making sure all the standards that you've got to meet, that's tough work. So having the clear expectation somehow that we're going to take the time to get those people in the room together and get a solution that people are happy with, and we're going to have to be a bit more flexible about potentially what some of those program timelines are in order to achieve it. And I mean, there's a famous thing, and I've spoken to Andy about this before, where having a piece of work and that's 95% complete, or a number of, say you've got 10 zones on your project and all of them are 95% complete. Well, that's not much use to, is it? One complete zone is way more use to you than having 10 that are at 95%.
Yep.
And so those will tell you the last 5% is the hardest.
And so don't get me wrong, there's moments where in your process you'll say, hey, we've cordoned off this bit, we've got enough definition, we can go forward with this area and we can build something. There's danger in the sense that we often, through our process, and again, even through our process of procurement, in order to get to a deal, we end up creating all sorts of compromises that sow the seeds for our later discontent. And I actually had a wonderful moment where we were sitting with the group and there were a few sort of compromises being reached. And I actually said, okay, we have to avoid being the guys that everyone reflects on in 2 years' time and says, what the were those guys thinking? Because as you said, there's a process that has to be gone through to get to a deal. Yeah. And we want a deal so we can get on with it. And we realize it's not going to be perfect. But it does mean that the continuity between those groups needs to somehow make sure that everyone understands why it was that compromise was reached so that we don't spend our lives just complaining about it and sending blame down the chain. So,
sure. Yeah.
And answer to the query, I think you're exactly right. But the client or organisational expectations at the outset need to be clear on what's actually involved in achieving that and being prepared to go down that path.
That's about openness, isn't it, amongst clients where you have had a successful project is to share that success so that the precedent is set. I mean, I can tell you now that it wasn't perfect. There was a few things like we thought we could do the secondary steel design, after the primary steel design. In hindsight, you couldn't really. It was a big laboratory building. There was a lot of secondary steel, almost primary steel, really. So okay. Next time, let's include that with the primary steel. Let's keep it as one package. So you learn these lessons, but you don't learn them if you don't even attempt that process or attempt a PCSA. If we keep on doing the same thing, then we don't even get a chance to evolve an ECI or a PCSA.
So does it fall to our leaders? To make sure that environment is established and that we remain true to it?
Yes, look, it does. I mean, look, at the end of the day, a potential client is always going to look at the options, procurement options on the market, available in the wider market. And at the moment, he looks at the options, and it's, and he's probably advised by certain organisations to stick with the fixed price lump sum. Beat everyone down to that lowest price. The truth is said, when you start looking at the other examples out there, you quite often find that a collaboration can actually come within budget and beat the program just because people are talking at the right time. But otherwise, you're waiting for the daisy chain to be built, aren't you?
Yeah, 100%. So I want to pick this up with Matt now. You've in your past, you've been a design manager, and this exact scenario that we're discussing, you've dealt with this exact scenario working out of the Becker's office for a period of time. What worked well there?
I think initially the commercial tension was released from that project due to the nature of the project being emergency drought response work.
Yep. It just gives us a little bit of context of what we're talking about.
Yeah, so this is, we've talked about before on the podcast, Waikato 50, which was initiated probably near on 3 years ago. It was a response to the lack of rainfall, funnily enough, in Auckland, which dictated, and the projections were that we would potentially run out of water in Auckland. So effectively Watercare identified that and said, we need to get a project team together to deliver a upgrade to the plant out at Tuakau to deliver another 50 million litres of water per day. And effectively what was done is from the enterprise model, which I'll touch on shortly, but through the enterprise model, they selected Fletcher Construction to deliver that package. And from, I think, after the call was made at Watercare, I was sitting in Watercare's office within a week. We had a project team sitting in Becker's probably 2 weeks later, and we built organically the team up to deliver the design collaboratively all the way through to when boots hit the ground, and delivered on time, thanks to a great planner, by the way.
Represented.
I guess that was an unleashed collaborative environment that extracted the maximum value, both in probably more in program than in cost. I have to be clear on that. That was a program-driven project. We extracted the maximum value through very early ECI engagement to determine how we could do that better.
Who made the brave call?
That was Watercare itself. I don't know who within Watercare, but it was a very brave call.
It was
probably born out of necessity.
That was Ravine. I had him on the podcast recently. We had another chat about it.
And it was born out of necessity.
Yeah.
But what I'd like to see is those brave calls being born out of non-necessity. And I think I'll touch on briefly now that there is a number of councils and principals who are taking those steps. The enterprise model was a good example that Watercare are moving down that path of working with selected contractors based on their attributes and their ability to deliver long programs of work. I personally believe there's the elements where it's diluted down into subcontractor level, doesn't show that true collaboration. But we're on the flip side, we're working currently with New Plymouth District Council, who have gone for a panel selection and are going to have awarded that and have already given us a program of works, and we've already engaged ECI at very early stage. And one really important point to note out is that there's so many models out there that demonstrate that earlier you get people working together and ECI happening, the more value you extract out of the project. And then I think that's more applicable even in horizontal infrastructure than vertical, because there's so many options around alignments, depths, methodologies, and the likes of. And then also Watercare, notably, they're going to be coming out with a asset upgrades and renewals program of works where they're going to make selections primarily based on non-price attributes, which will unleash a good 20 contractors, I guess at least, on a program of works for 5 to 10 years. So the transition is happening. And I'm really pleased to see that. I'd like that to be pushed out more wider. And the really important bit is not just the top layer of collaboration, but push that through the behaviours and values that's demonstrated by all. So we're seeing it at the subcontractors, the next level of subcontractors, all the tiers down. So it's not just the top guys that go, okay, you have a model that encourages collaboration, but the next level down, you're actually doing non-priced attributes only selection of the lowest performing bid, and there's elements of the contract that you're engaged in under the panel that suggest you must use the lowest price.
Yeah.
And then cost consultants putting through and saying that must be the case. So those are kind of contradictory. So the behaviours are starting at the right levels. They just need to be filtered down.
What are your thoughts on this, Rennie?
Oh, definitely. Hey, listen, I mean, we need an integrate, going back to the words of Sir Peter Egan in the mid-1990s. we need an integrated approach. We've got to stop working in silos. We've got to, have that collaboration from top to bottom, and with that collaboration, comes trust and better behaviours. It worked in the UK. I mean, Network Rail were one of the most adversarial employers of all time. They did a complete turnaround and had a supply chain of something like 700, consultant subcontractors, put them all on fantastic, payment terms. It completely changed the face of Network Rail and actually working for them and people actually wanting to work for them. So we know that, those values work. It worked in the UK in the mid-1990s with the birth of the NEC and a different way of working. I do feel as though this is where New Zealand is now, is that we need, we haven't got a Sir Michael Latham or Sir Peter Egan actually, doing this research on the industry. It's a much smaller industry, but unless we change things, with inflation running quite high, interest rates running really, really high, with poor contract drafting, with unfit, contract engineers, the contract is just going to keep getting worse. So we've really got to change. And this is, I've had more disputes land on my desk in the last couple of months than I've had in 11 years. And that's telling of the fact that the industry just isn't working. And then, this change is needed and change for the better.
Perhaps, as you said, then necessity will breed this innovation that we need to change things.
Well, we're going to lose, good subcontractors otherwise, because everyone's chasing the same dollar.
I think we already are, aren't we?
Yeah, it's with a lot of, absolutely 60% of all, 70% of all liquidations last September were contract companies. They can't survive if they're not being paid. I've got 22 disputes on at the moment, and out of the 22, 17 are subcontractors that are chasing payment. Retentions for jobs that finished a year ago. That should be an easy thing to attain, yet it's not.
I was just saying, on the flip side of that, we have a huge infrastructure underinvestment that needs to be rectified in the near future. So the subcontractors going under, and we have increased capacity. We just don't have enough skilled people in this country and skilled contractors in the country to deliver everything that's required. So, hopefully we don't get to the point of necessity. There's hopefully some people out there that are recognising this.
I think to some extent we're already there. When you look at the critical infrastructure that we need to build in terms of healthcare, we're already there. We're going backwards. The longer we take to make a decision on this critical infrastructure and kicking off, because at the end of the day, it's never cheaper than now. And every year that we push this back, it's bringing it's compounding the problem and the fear.
Time is more expensive than money, isn't it? I've said that
time is money, absolutely.
So how do we celebrate the success of good collaborations and publish that to people who will listen? That's the question.
This is interesting, isn't it? I mean, in England, we had the Audit Commission. So all the government projects were audited and it was public, whether or not they were successful or not. I don't think that happens here. So, unless it's by word of mouth, you don't actually know, or you're someone like me that deals with lots of disputes, GP, your general public and consultants have no idea just how badly, projects are going. So, we need to kind of address the fact that, and I know we can do it by this sort of kind of, get together, but there needs to be some publicising, just how badly the industry is performing, some kind of KPI index. I think Construction Clients Group may do something, but whether or not they're getting all the information, I think, they're getting it from select people and select companies. It's, that information is not out there. So everyday consultants, contractors, apart from the subcontractors, are really, really hurting. You've got no idea really quite how bad it is, only from a singular kind of level.
Cool. So just to wrap things up, can I go around the room and ask each one of you to answer one question in one sentence?
This is an Andy question.
Oh, probably. It's an Andy question. I'm winging this, mate. All right. Tell me one thing you would change in the process in one sentence.
Next. Let's go to the next one. Let me think about it.
You think about it, right, Marty? One thing you would change.
Look, my answer is to change that procurement model, get the PCSAs out there, and let's go and build things correctly and in a timely manner.
Cool. James?
I think needs to be an adjustment of expectations on the client side in particular would be my biggest
great. Rainey?
Collaboration, clearly, and upskilling the contract administrators.
Wrapping up, mate?
Yeah, I still haven't thought of it because it's just, I think we've raised so many points through this discussion.
We
right?
have,
And I don't
we
know
have.
where you start. I mean, if I take it back to the examples of really fantastic collaboration, I'd just say PCSA, ECI, early engagement, selection of contractors and subbies.
Yeah, okay. So looks like there's a common theme here. isn't
There
there?
is.
Go on.
One last thing.
Yep.
In order to feed this machine and even the old machine, we need more skilled people. We need to start training people younger. There's a big gap.
Well, you train them and they pack up and go across the ditch.
Well, that's a different
It's a
topic
common
on a
theme.
different
Yeah,
podcast, I think, mate.
100%. Yeah, I'm not going to bring that up. But again, I think there's a common theme here, which is collaboration, ECIs, PCSAs, and better understanding of clients. Would you guys agree? That's
Yeah,
summarizing
yeah.
it. Cool. Awesome. That's wrapping that up. That was such an awkward wrap up.
Can we do that?
Just
Do
say
that
thanks
wrap up
everyone.
again, mate?
Thanks everyone for being
Yeah.
here.
Thanks everyone for being
I
here.
appreciate you taking time out of your day.
Yeah, hang on.
What do you want for lunch?
Oh, we're going for lunch. I think Bridge booked us a restaurant somewhere. So, okay. So wrapping it up. Yeah. So, yep. Hey guys, thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for all your inputs. I really hope that the New Zealand public listen to this and make positive change in our procurement model and we start working collaboratively. But thank you all for your time and input into this podcast. It's been a truly enjoyable experience for me.
Good to be here. Thank
You're
you.
welcome, mate.
Thank you,
Yeah,
mate.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for
Cheers,
inviting
guys.
us.